Next guest is the only woman competing for the Republican presidential nomination. Carly Fiorina has been gaining ground in the polls since her commanding performance at last week's early Republican debate. Now Ms. Fiorina is challenging what she calls the status quo for working women in America in her latest op-ed in the Huffington Post. She joins me right now from Mason City, Iowa. Welcome, Carly. Good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
For having me, Maria. Good to be with you.
Carly, we've been talking this morning about this Hillary email controversy. Let me ask you your thoughts. Coming from Hewlett-Packard, showing the leadership that you have for so many years, she obviously scrubbed the server clean. What do you think that means in terms of, in terms of those emails and what she was doing on government business? Do you think those emails will ever be found?
Well, I don't know, because it now appears that this server has been with some IT company in New Jersey since 2013. I'm pretty sure they scrubbed it thoroughly, but it reminds me of the old adage, the cover-up is always worse than the crime. The more we learn here, the more it appears that Hillary Clinton very purposefully and deliberately used a home-brewed system and made sure nobody knew what was on that home-brewed system.
Well, I think one of the reasons that you had such a fantastic commanding performance in that first debate, and so many people are talking about you right now, wanting to know more about you, is because of the leadership that you have been showing. And in terms of this election, it will be about leadership, but it's also about trust. What can you tell us in terms of your own story and communicating that story, whereas we see Hillary on the Democratic side unwilling to take questions, unwilling to talk about her own story? There's a real contrast.
Well, there is. I take any question I'm asked and will go anywhere and answer questions. But, I talk to the voters about my life. I started as a secretary. Ultimately, I became the chief executive of Hewlett-Packard. That story is only possible in the United States of America. But I've also talked with them about the hard times I've experienced. I'm a cancer survivor, and that was a long, tough battle, not just for me, but for my family. We lost our younger daughter to the demons of addiction. And everywhere I go, people come up to me and say that they too have lost a child, for example, or they too have a family member or personally have experienced a battle with cancer. The point is that I think leaders are made, not born. I think leaders, through all of their life's experiences, about which I have been completely transparent, whether it was getting fired at Hewlett-Packard, I was. Maria, we've known each other a long time. I've been absolutely upfront about that from the day it happened. Sometimes when you challenge the status quo, you make enemies. It's why so few people lead. But ultimately, I believe that we need a leader in the White House who understands that their highest calling is to unlock the potential of this nation now. And I am convinced that the citizens of this nation actually know what we need to do. And the reason they are frustrated and sick of politics and politicians is because some of these answers are so obvious, and people give big speeches, and yet nothing really seems to change.
Yeah, so how are you going to challenge the status quo in Washington then, Carly? I mean, you talk about getting fired from Hewlett-Packard. In retrospect, you look at some of the successes that you had at Hewlett, doubling revenues, more than quadrupling the growth rate, tripling the rate of innovation with all those patents, 11 patents a day. How do you challenge the status quo in Washington, knowing that the people today are sick and tired of the establishment and this inability to get anything done?
You harness that frustration. And the way I would harness that frustration is through the power of technology. So let me be very specific. Every week, for example, in the weekly radio address, I will go into the Oval Office and I will ask my fellow citizens to take out their smartphones. And we will engage in a Q&A. So, for example, my first question might be, do you think it's important that we know where your money is being spent? Do you think it's important that we go to some form of zero-based budgeting, as many states have, where every single dollar has to be justified every single year? Fellow citizens, press 1 for yes on your smartphones. Press 2 for no. That technology exists. And when you harness the power of citizenry, politicians respond. We know politicians respond to pressure. I might ask another question. Do you think we should go to some form of meritocracy in the federal government so that it's no longer possible that a federal government employee fail at their job, watch pornography even all day long and still earn the same pay, pension, and benefits as somebody trying really hard to do a good job. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. This was intended to be a citizen government. We know that politicians will respond to pressure and get something done. And so a leader understands that their job is to harness the power to challenge the status quo.
Yeah,
citizens have that power.
Because so many people were against, for example, Obamacare. And we saw poll and poll after poll who basically said, look, we don't want Obamacare. So give us specific plans that you have for Obamacare. When and if you are in that office, the highest in the land, what are you going to do? What's your solution to Obamacare? And I'd like to hear your solutions on regulation as well. You say that it's highly regulated, and as a result of all those regulations, that's keeping business at bay. They're not spending money. They're not hiring new workers. So give us your solutions.
3 things. 1, we must repeal it. We can't tinker around the edges of it. It is a vast, complicated set of laws and regulations that, frankly, nobody understands. And so we're going to continue to see, if we don't repeal it, the consolidation of the health insurance and the drug industries, which will not serve consumers well. Second, we need to ask states to manage high-risk pools. There are people who truly need help. I'm a cancer survivor. I understand pre-existing conditions cannot prevent someone from getting the help they need. States have managed high-risk pools successfully in the past. We need to allow them to do it again. And point number 3, we need to try the one thing we've never tried. We have never tried the free market. Health insurance has always been a cozy little arrangement between regulators and health insurance companies. We used to do it on the 50-state level. Now all we've done is nationalize that. Let's actually have health insurance companies have to compete for everybody's business across state lines like we do homeowners insurance or car insurance or other products.
I'm going to come back to regulation in a moment, Carly, because I think that's real important for the business audience as well as people worried about their own job. But let me go to foreign policy for a moment. You were a member of the CIA External Advisory Board. How does that set you up in terms of experience for some of the issues that we're dealing with? We've got ISIS now using mustard gas against the Kurds. We've got, obviously, this Iran deal. Will one of your first priorities be to reverse the Iran deal? And what are your other foreign policy priorities?
So my first day in the Oval Office, I will make 2 phone calls. The first will be to Bibi Netanyahu, my good friend, to reassure him that we will stand with the State of Israel. The second will be to the Supreme Leader of Iran, who may not take the phone call, but the message would be crystal clear. New deal. New deal. Until you open every military and nuclear facility to real, anytime, anywhere inspections, we will, the United States of America will, make it as difficult as possible for you to move money anywhere in the global financial system. We can do that. We don't need anybody's help to do it. Those 2 phone calls are not only important in and of themselves, but they send a clear message to every ally we have and every adversary we have that the United States of America is back in the leadership business. We need to begin pushing back immediately on our adversaries, whether it is China in the South China Sea. China is trying to control a trade route through which $5 trillion worth of goods and services go every year. We cannot permit them to do that. Russia continues to march forward because we have not pushed back. So I would begin in that case to rebuild the 6th Fleet, rebuild the missile defense program. We need to have the strongest military on the face of the planet. Everybody has to know it. We have to support our allies in their fights against ISIS, for example. We ought to be arming the Kurds. We've been talking about it for 3 years. We ought to be giving King Abdullah of Jordan, another fine man, the bombs and materials requested. We ought to be sharing intelligence with the Egyptians. And by the way, we also ought to be providing Australia, Japan, the Philippines with the support that they have requested so that together we can push back on China, which is becoming our rising adversary.
How will you deal with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I won't talk to him. I've met him, and we've talked way too much to him. But Vladimir Putin will not stop until he faces, senses strength and resolve on the other side. It is why we must immediately begin rebuilding the 6th Fleet. It is why we must immediately begin building the missile defense program in Poland. I would conduct regular, aggressive military exercises in the Baltic states, and I would be moving troops in and out of Germany. Vladimir Putin will get the message, but we ought to quit talking.